as chefs, we've got ingredients that we use. We've got our recipes. That defines us as a chef. But the plating up part of it is how we're known. Like, ultimately, I want the food to look good. It's a representation of me as a chef and of the restaurant that I'm part of. You could literally show chefs a picture and say who has plated this up. And that's what I want. I want people to be like, well, that's Stephen Edwards. To be able to get to that stage of my career. I'm not saying there now, but I'd love people to be like, yeah, that looks like a Stephen Edwards dish. I would say I'm still in very much like a creative part of my career. You know, we change the menu 6 times a year here at Etch. Having that ambition to want to better it, or to create something different, and that's where we're really fortunate of where we are. What does a guest want from an experience at Etch? And that's the way we've got to look at it.
Welcome to the Food Envy podcast, where we explore the visual side of food. Today I'm down in beautiful Brighton with Steve Edwards from Etch by Stephen Edwards. How's it going, Steve?
Really good, thank you. Great to have you with us today.
Well, thank you for having me down. I'm really looking forward to the 3 dishes that you're going to be doing for me later. But what I wanted to start with is maybe just a little history of you, and then possibly a little idea of your plating history, where you kind of really felt that visuals were getting more and more important for you.
Yeah, so I've been a chef for over 20 years. I like to think that my career progressed as I went on, which is more for my confidence, just from my technical ability as well. So I started off in like rosetted kitchens and restaurants, and then slowly built my way up to give me the confidence to work with Matt Gillen at the past at South Lodge Hotel, who was on Great British Menu, won a Michelin star, and that's really where I learned a lot about plating up. If anyone knows anything about Matt's food, it's visually quite different. He uses unusual flavour combinations, but also he's one of the most technical chefs I've worked with, and I loved that part of my CV.
So before
I spent with him,
so before you started with Matt, were visuals not really things that big a deal? It was more, and then you realised what a difference it can make, almost.
Yeah, I'd say visuals make a difference, like almost like the higher up you go in hospitality, in fine dining. It's not necessarily, it has to look picturesque. It's more that you're working with more high quality ingredients. You're trying to do something different. And the places I was working in before were more like brasserie style, so real focus on big bold flavours. Plating up was important. It had to look like clean and sharp and everything, but that wasn't the main focus. The main focus was getting a really tasty dish out in a busy restaurant.
So do you think it's actually like visuals has come further down the food chain, whereas it's more important in the less fine dining restaurants, more brasserie styles, because things like Instagram, social media, things like that, we are so much more visual now than we were because of those things. Do you think that kind of is driven down more, that more chefs are having to take more care about what they do?
Potentially. I mean, it seems really unfair of me to say, like, the higher up the chain, or the fine dining thing that you go, visuals become more important. I think visuals naturally are important at every level of food, even if you're talking about fast food chains. The way they present their food has to look appetizing. You want to eat it because you eat with your eyes first, and that doesn't matter whether it's a sandwich or a really expensive meal. I think the visuals become more about the chef, potentially trying to show his personality on the plate, and also take the guest on a different journey.
I think that's going to what we were saying slightly off camera as well, about how story is getting more and more important, and people like you are the story. People like you are why they come, and if you've got that individual style or strong belief in sustainability or whatever that might be, that's what translates. That's what people are interested in, I think, isn't it? And visuals is just one part of that.
Yeah, I think it's the whole experience. I think COVID has a big part to play on how we want to feel, how we spend our time. And I think people want different experiences. I think they want to make something of their life and reward themselves with, whether it's a nice meal, a nice holiday, or to spend more time with family and kids.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think COVID's got an awful lot to not be grateful for, but it has expedited a lot of change. I think that probably was coming anyway, but it has made quite a difference. Just having a look around your restaurant, actually, clearly you've got some brilliant art in here. Clearly art maybe has quite a big impact on you and your restaurant. Do you see plating as more art, or is it more of a craft, do you think?
It's funny that you should say that. Obviously, I love art. I think art and food go really well together, and they always have done. But when creating a dish, it's not necessarily about how it looks first. That's almost like the last part of it.
Yep.
You want to think about how it's going to eat. There's no point stacking food up if that's not how you want it to be eaten. You know, we're cooking one of the dishes or plating up one of the dishes today, which is our chalk stream trout, and it's laid out so you can almost eat sections of it separately. It's got a horseradish ice cream, so instead of that being overpowering and going down through the dish, the way I wanted it eaten was almost in sections. Yeah, and I think that's important when plating up, is how you want the guests to eat.
Yeah. It's funny, isn't it? Because I come at it from clearly a non-professional outlook at this sort of stuff. But in some of the videos that I've done for my channel, one of them was the importance of sketching, and that would have to be done earlier in the stage. So, do you sketch? Have you sketched, or do you literally just it's ingredients first, it's taste first, and then the visuals is kind of important, clearly, because I've seen your stuff. Yeah. But it's at the end of the chain as opposed to thinking a bit earlier on potentially.
I've seen chefs sketch, and I wish I could go through that process like that. I'd say the way I always approach a dish is about the way it eats, the flavours, the combination, and the ingredients first. I find then putting that together visually is a bit more easy. And that's probably through the training I've had as a chef. Yeah. Maybe it's because I'm not looking to make that much of a mark on the actual visuals being different. I really just want it to look organic and not like, ultimately I want the food to look good. It's a representation of me as a chef and of the restaurant that I'm part of.
Absolutely. I think certainly from doing this podcast, I think this is like the 12th maybe. I think people definitely fall into two camps. One is where it is, and I guess the thing is from this podcast as well is everybody is experienced, you know, so to be able to do it kind of more freestyling seems to be it's where you have to, but then some still will plan it in advance and know that I want 3 of this, I want negative space here, I'm using monochromatic color style, or I'm using analogous colors, all of these sorts of things, and they can kind of add that into the design of the dish as a whole. Whereas a lot of people who've been doing it a while, it's literally like, I know what my ingredients are, I'm going to do this and this, but it's trying to help people possibly that are not as experienced to find ways to start, because as a home cook, it's just really hard, you know, how to start, where to do it, and things like that. So it's just interesting to see how different people go about it.
Yeah, I think proportion is really important. That needs to be touched on as well, just because visually something could look amazing, but if it's not got the right proportions of flavours on there, then that's going to let you down. And I'd rather a dish ate really well than to look visually better, but also it's how far you take that dish also. And I would say I'm still in very much like a creative part of my career. You know, we change the menu 6 times a year here at Etch, which is really nice, and has that lovely seasonality to it. I think as I potentially get older as a chef, I might start nailing down some of those signature dishes, and then think, actually, how can I make that different and more dramatic? But at the moment, it's really just playing around with flavours, having fun with food, and trying to take our guests on a journey.
I guess when you're doing it 6 times a year and you're having about 7 dishes per menu,
so,
like that, a lot, isn't it, to get through?
Yeah, the kind of way we worked before was we'd actually change 2 or 3 dishes a week, so we'd actually do 13 full menus a year, which is crazy. That's kind of how we've had Etch for the last 4. For the first 4 years, 4 or 5 years, and then it's only been more recently that we're like, actually, how often are guests really coming here? How consistent is it changing dishes that frequently? And just trying to nail down on almost like our favourites. But during that time, we learned so much, so many techniques. We learned a lot about ourselves, and it's really important to have that consistency in a restaurant.
So when you are planning one of these dishes, you've got your ingredients, it's seasonal, you've been maybe driven by the seasons, you know, you're using a beetroot because they're amazing, whatever it might be. You've got all that, you've got your mise en place. Is it literally, do you do a collaborative with the guys in the kitchen, or are you pretty much there by yourself and you're thinking this and this? Is there anything that you start with? Is there anything along those sorts of lines that could help people potentially that aren't as experienced as you?
So the menu's almost like semi-written out for the year, so to speak.
Wow, really?
Yeah, we've had Etch 7 years. We've, you know, like I said, when we're changing 2 or 3 dishes a week, we probably have over 100 dishes. So we've got all these dishes, all flavour combinations, kind of there at our fingertips. So the way we kind of map out the year would be around August, September time for the following year. we'd sit around with the senior chefs in the team and just be like, this is the flavours that we want to see on the menu throughout the year.
Yep.
And it's almost like, right, we want to have strawberries on the menu. We don't want to miss that season. What dish are we going to do? And it could just be like the dish today, strawberry and hay. Let's just put that down, like the flavour combination. Let's lock that in.
Yep.
And then as we get closer to it, we'd then play around with it. If the hay element wasn't right, we'd fall back onto clotted cream or creme fraiche.
Yep.
2 other dishes or flavour combinations we've done before.
Okay.
And I think that's really important, is having something that's good, that's worked before, but having that ambition to want to better it or to create something different. And that's where we're really fortunate of where we are in our journey, is that, you know what, if it's not right, chefs get annoyed, don't get me wrong, like having developed a dish with strawberries and hay in it, and then to say, actually, it's not good enough to go on the menu, that is frustrating, but we've got a ready-made dish up our sleeves that we can replace.
Okay.
I don't know whether that really answers your question. So
let's talk about that strawberry and hay dish specifically, because we will see it in a bit. So maybe you can just describe, if you can describe what it looks like. But then, how did you come up with the process of, maybe the plate that it's on? Yeah. Do you have fairly standard plates? Did you pick a specific plate for this kind of thing? Yeah. Have you got, do you have odd numbers? Do you have even numbers? Do you have clearly the scale is important? Do you have a smaller plate than a larger plate? Yeah. Any of those kinds of things, really?
Yeah. So onto the crockery, we use Surrey ceramics. Yeah. I really love ceramic plates. Maybe it's just my history working in 5-star hotels and fine dining. I'm put off by fine bone china.
Yes.
For example, I think it gives that feeling of, I mean, it is nice, don't get me wrong. Right? For a special occasion, having beautiful silver and fine bone china is what you want. But for us here at Etch, it's a reflection of me and where I'm at in my career, and it's about having tasty food that's fun. And I think the canvas for me isn't lots of different coloured plates. We use quite a neutral colour that we selected with Surrey ceramics, and that's what we kind of have. The shapes of the plates aren't anything too crazy or extroverted. They really just show the food as a blank canvas.
Yes. Well, I think there's a reason why most artists start with a white piece of paper, right? They don't start with blue.
Yeah.
There's a good reason. I think get very good contrast between reds or yellows or whatever. You get that from a more neutral tone.
Yeah.
Is there much texture on them?
And no, but you do get that with the ceramic. But also we've got to think about, these plates have got to transition between 6 menus a year, and that's another thought. I think when you commit to a certain plate for a dish, that's then locked in, isn't it, for a period of time. That then becomes a chef's signature.
It's no small investment either, is it? Really? You can't be chopping and changing these things with each menu.
Yeah, no, 100%. Once that's then the canvas. I think what we're talking about is the flavour combination is what we lock in on our spreadsheet. And that's what people at home might be looking for. So if you want to do something at home, you might be thinking, like I said, strawberry and hay. That then is the flavour combination. How do we then balance it into a dish? We also look at all our strawberry recipes.
Once you keep a history of what you've done in the past.
Yeah, we keep. Okay. Yeah, so like the repertoire of recipes I've picked up from all the chefs I've worked with. I think that's really important as a young chef growing up, is that people are happy to kind of be like, oh, I'm going to learn this. And you think you're going to remember it forever because you're doing it every day. Yeah. But actually you don't, you forget about it. And I think what's really important for us is recording that process and how we record it. Is it a weight? Is it a measurement? Because by putting something on this time last year, no one's ever going to remember. How did we make that twill? Was it a certain temperature in the oven? Was there a fan on the oven? All these things, I want that in the recipe. So when we come to it this year, it's like, right, that's jogging our memory. That worked, that didn't. If you type strawberry into our Dropbox, it will come up with probably about 50 recipes, all about strawberry. And then it's looking through those and thinking, actually, let's just select 2 or 3 strawberry recipes. Let's start with that, put them together. Then we come up with our concept dish, try it as a team and think, you know what, that tastes really good. Wow, that was quick and easy. Or actually, it's not quite working how we want it. Might need a bit more of this flavour, might need a bit of that, bit of texture. And we kind of evolve the dish from that stage. Yeah, it starts simple. We try not to overcomplicate it at the beginning. Start simple and then start critiquing and evolving the dish into the final stages.
I think that's fascinating in terms of the evolution of how these things work. Do you ever involve the diner in the evolution of that as well? So you'll get some feedback from them, or it's all done in-house and then it doesn't kind of, once it's being served, it doesn't necessarily change that much? Because I've spoken to some chefs that will literally, when it comes out for the first time, will actually go out and ask diners, what do you think of this? Not necessarily from a visual point of view, but I'm sure that's part of the feedback necessarily.
Yeah.
And based on what people tell him, he will necessarily change it as it goes. It's just interesting to know where that evolution kind of starts and stops.
That will always be part. I was shaking my head when you said Nui. I was kind of visualising a diner coming in and eating a dish through that trial process, which I've seen some chefs do, which is quite fun. They might do a pop up and be like new dishes.
Yeah,
we're constantly getting feedback from our guests. I like to think that chefs and waiters in our restaurant are all going out and greeting the guests, and we love that feedback. And that would always come up in almost like our decision making when we're finalising a dish. It's like, well, we did that last year. We didn't get too many good comments on that. And sometimes it's not about that particular dish. It might mean there was a better dish on that tasting menu.
Yep.
What we're really interested in, was there any negative feedback? Was there anything that the guests didn't like? Was it a bit of a radical flavour combination? You know, something like coriander, I didn't realise until maybe like 6 or 7 years ago that people either taste it as a herb or they taste it as a soap.
Was that right?
Yeah, so coriander, it's like you can have it as like a soapy flavour. Because I was always like, well, I love coriander.
Yeah.
As a herb, I find it really like floral. Yeah, but to some people that gives a soapy flavour, and that just blew my mind a little bit. And we've got to remember, like, we could both look at the same piece of art, and you'd be like, "That's amazing," and I could be like, "You know what? Yeah, I think that's rubbish."
Yeah,
is that the art's fault, or is that our perception? Of the art.
I know you say that. I think I have heard about coriander. I think it's actually a genetic.
Yeah,
it's a genetic thing.
And it's things like that that we've got to be careful. On a set tasting menu, as much as we want to be radical and come up with unusual flavour combinations, what percentage of our guests will really appreciate that? What does a guest want from an experience at Etch? And that's the way we've got to look at it.
So what kind of impacts are there on plating now? Are there things that have been driven by the diner, for things like cost or, because cost of living, things like that has had an impact?
Absolutely. I think our journey through Etch has been quite a different journey. Like the last 7 years we've had everything thrown at us, but what I love about working here with the team is our resilience to change. And like I said, we were in that period where we're doing 2 or 3 dishes a week, kind of evolving the menu that way. We're now at a stage that we just really want to give our guests value, and that's really difficult in the current market. Where is the value? Everyone just sees their pay packet and it disappears in a couple of weeks. And we feel that the £50 5-course menu is as good as what we can do in terms of value, still using the same quality ingredients. We haven't compromised on that, and that was something that's really important to us. Do we go to like a £35 menu but then use different suppliers? And that's not what we're about. So we came up with a strategy of the £50, 5 courses, have a couple of upgrade courses for those that want to push the boat out a little bit more, but really just get people eating out again. I think we had that period after, I keep talking about COVID, but where everyone was eating out. Then we had the period of everyone's like, actually, we need to save money now. And now it's just about getting people to come out, experience what restaurants offer, because I think we're at this, I do think we're over the worst of it, but I do think it's quite a volatile time for restaurants. The restaurants closing, 2 or 3 restaurants that I see every week closing at the moment. And we just need to keep supporting those restaurants, otherwise we won't have them anymore.
It's one of those things that I think people would miss and don't realise how much until they're gone. So in terms of that £5, sorry, £5.
I wish it was £5.
£50 for 5 courses.
Yes.
Has that then had an impact on how you can present stuff? Because clearly you're very much ingredient led. So will they become even sort of simpler in terms of the presentation as well? Because there's nothing wrong with simple presentation. The whole Nordic style and stuff I absolutely love. But then it has to be even more perfectly cooked, better ingredients, all that kind of stuff. But is that then difficult? Because that then has a cost as well, doesn't it? So it's how do you balance those?
I think when we're looking at changing our direction, so to speak, we had to look at what we wouldn't compromise on. And some of those things we talked about already, like the quality of the ingredients, the proportion of food on the plate is really important. We're not just doing 5 courses and making them really small dishes. We want them to fill you up at the end. But also the plating comes into it in terms of the amount of team that we need to deliver that product. And those are things that we didn't want to compromise on. But what we could do is actually, instead of having, I think last year or 2 years ago, we had 4 menus running. Now it's literally the 5-course and the 7-course menu, so just 2 menus, simplifying things to make it easy for us to deliver a great menu at an affordable price. But the presentation is something that I know the chefs are keen not to play with. They want to work here, and that's the balance that we need to set within the team. If you dumb things down or make them a little bit more simple, we do risk then their learning and their development.
Yeah,
and that's kind of my job as the restaurant owner, is to balance all these things. It's the guest, our team, trying to make a profit, trying to stay afloat, but also pushing the company forward through these times as well.
I think it's important as well, because as a punter, I want to come to a restaurant and have things I can't do at home. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And that clearly ingredient, but also how something looks and how it's presented, because that's the first impression I get as a diner. When I walk in the door and that first plate's put down in front of me, the thing that I love is that, that sense of wow. Yeah. It could be a sense of theatre, it could be the smell or whatever. It's that whole holistic experience of stuff that I can't do at home. And it's not just not doing the washing up and all that stuff, which is great, but it's those sorts of things that I think separate and will keep people coming out, is that skill, that precision, that the aesthetic, the smell, the service, all that kind of stuff is so important. And that's just a tricky balance to get and to make money, right? To make a profit. Because
I completely agree with you when you say you want something that can't be created at home. That's what we need to keep focus on. And I think you are in danger of making things too simple. You give the illusion that actually I could have done that at home, and that's not what we want. And like I said, that's one of the non-negotiables when we came up with this formula, that we still want to take guests on a journey. This isn't dumbing down Etch. That's not what we wanted. Yeah.
So in terms of inspiration for you then, not necessarily from a cooking point of view, but from a visual point of view, we talked about a couple of chefs before turning up. So I've got some pictures here, because clearly some of the chefs, world-renowned, Simon Rogan, stuff like that. And I'm just interested. So, for example, when you see this, what do you see? Why do you like that?
I like this dish because I can see the plate. I can see nature. I think it looks very organic. It looks very pretty. It's nothing. It looks like you want to discover something more about it. I'm guessing there's layers of flavours in there that you're going to cut through and experience.
Yeah. For me, again, the word you used earlier is proportion. I think it sits very nicely on that plate. The flowers break up the colour, which is really, really nice. So the garnish is great. I just think it's it's got lovely colour in it. Yeah. All of his plates, clearly very, very natural. Yeah. He's very well known for his is it market garden? Not market garden, kitchen garden.
Yes.
And again, his ceramics are beautiful, but I guess he has bigger budgets for different plates, different dishes.
All that lovely neutral element to it. And I think ceramics, they absorb light instead of reflecting. And I think food just looks really pretty on ceramics.
Yeah. But this one in particular, I particularly like, because I love the symmetry of it. Yeah. And again, the skill level to produce something like that, to not have the sauce bleeding into whatever's on this side. Again, that's what I love. If that was presented to me, it's like, that's fantastic, isn't it, really? The skill it's taken to produce something like that, and then to taste amazing.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at such a great era for food, really, because it is exciting. Even though definitely the last 50, 60 years in the UK at a high level, chefs are still coming up with ways to present food that's interesting and makes you want to eat and explore the dish.
I think that's one of those things that cookbooks, for me, was the vanguard of that. I mean, I remember looking at a cookbook from 20 years ago, maybe a Jamie book or something like that. Loved it. But if you look at the photography then to the photography that you get in a cookbook now, it's night and day. Yeah. Just the time, the effort, the planning to then also the skill of cooking it. It's just so much different. And then also obviously social media as well. Yeah. It's really important, and things like this just makes you want to go. Yeah. I mean, it just looks wonderful.
I think it's about bringing nature to life. Yes. I think that's the way I describe Simon's food. It doesn't look unnatural, does it? No, it's very much like nature has arrived on a plate. That looks, you know what it is. Like especially in England, when you look out into the countryside, nothing is like straight lines. It looks very organic. It almost looks messy, but perfect at the same time. And I'm not saying that Simon's food looks messy by any means, but it just looks like it's just landed on the plate. Yeah, it looks perfect.
Well, this is one of the things. Even messy dishes takes a level of precision to be able to do it. It's almost like that contradiction. Yeah. I've watched doing this channel. I've watched quite a lot of Massimo Bottura. Yeah. Just because I guess he kind of spearheaded that messy style of plating. but it still takes an amazing artistic mind to come up with that.
Yeah.
You know the story about the Oops I dropped the lemon tart,
Yeah.
but then be able to see the beauty in something like that.
So I was fortunate to work with Massimo on my time on Masterchef. So I did the dish Oops I dropped the lemon tart.
Well, you made that.
I made that with him. We did the tiramisu. We did the different ages of parmesan.
Yeah.
The psychedelic beef, which is what you're talking about. So my role was to plate that up for his guests, beef dish. And it's one of those dishes that it looks easier to do than in reality, because you've got to really let loose when plating that dish up. It's almost have no fear.
Yeah.
And the amount of mess it made of the kitchen afterwards was ridiculous. But
because when I first saw his dish, I had that immediate feeling, I can do that. How hard can that be?
Yeah.
And it's you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Something just looks easy. You don't know the processes that go into that, if you see what I mean. And that really was one of those moments where I started to look differently at presentation and plate design and stuff like that, because even when you're freestyling and stuff, it looks easy because you're doing it. It's like when you watch a golfer or you watch snooker, those sports on TV just look too easy.
Yeah.
And then you go and do it. It's really hard.
I think the important thing is like, as chefs, we've got ingredients that we use, high quality. We've got our recipes. That defines us as a chef. But the plating up part of it is how we're known. And I think when you look at people like Simon Rogan's food, Massimo Bottura, I thought that's what you were going to do with the pictures. I reckon you could literally show chefs a picture and say who has plated this up.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. I want people to be like, well, that's Stephen Edwards. I'd love to be able to get to that stage of my career. I'm not saying it's there now, but I'd love people to be like, yeah, that looks like a Stephen Edwards dish. Yeah. And I think that's, when we're talking about plating up, there's no right or wrong, but you want to have that identity.
Yeah, you want to have a
plate that's really important.
You want a visual signature, I think, don't you really? And again, there would probably only be a handful of chefs in the world that probably have that level of recognition from the plate, and he would certainly be one. You know, Simon Rogan too.
You've got Michael O'Hare in there. His like food, he does use a lot of theatre with the plates, but then not a lot of contrast. It tends to be like quite black and white. But it's an exciting chef.
Yeah, I've got to ask. So when you were doing the Oops I dropped the lemon tart, are you literally just dropping it?
So he builds it. So everything, the way it's plated up, almost needs to be in front of the guests, because everything is plated up with tweezers.
Right.
It's crazy that I can still remember this as if I'm in the kitchen 11 years ago. But so everything is plated up perfectly. It's a perfectly made sablé biscuit, a lovely lemon sabayon on the top. And there's bits of bergamot on there. I don't really remember too much. Maybe saffron was on there. So it's beautifully plated up. And then the part comes is where you get the back of the spoon and then splat it. So through the sabayon, through the sablé biscuit, and it kind of splatters all over the plate.
So you're whacking it as opposed to dropping it?
Yes.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. So it's not dropped on the plate, but the story behind it was that when he created the dish, and I think he says it was the first night the dish was live at his perfect idea of a lemon tart with all these garnishes. The chef that was taken out into the restaurant dropped the plate and he looked at it on the floor, and the chef was really scared. You know, he's looking at Massimo like, what do we do? And Massimo just looked at the plate on the floor and thought that was a work of art and wanted to recreate that. So even the plate that he's plated up on, he had made so it looks like a broken plate that's been put back together. So that's Massimo in a nutshell. I think he's got the flavours, he's got the ideas, but then he wants to execute it in a different way. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes him different to everybody else. Is that you can see that,
and he's crazy. You know, like, but that's what all artists. I think you get to that stage where, I mean, he's such a good chef. He could plate up however he wanted, and people would still queue to eat his food. And I think he knows that, and he just wants to be different, have an identity, and it's what gets him, you know, these opportunities.
Well, I think it's having that inspiration, because I'm sure he's inspired by lots of different things. One of the chefs that on social media that I've seen has quite puts up quite a lot of art stuff is Bains.
Yeah.
And he seems to take huge inspiration from different things. Clearly, he can draw as well, because I don't know if you've seen any videos. He draws the things out.
Well, that's what I was thinking of when you said, "Do I sketch a dish?" He calls it doodling. For me, I find it really fascinating. That's how a lot of chefs actually work like that. Whereas for me, I'd rather get the ingredients together and almost like start plating it up and then seeing it differently. I mean, there's so many different things involved, isn't there? Like molds and different shapes and stuff. But for me, I find the plating up is important, but it's almost the last aspect of the dish rather than the first.
The other thing I was quite interested to talk to you about was, because I know you have quite good connections with Brighton Football Club and stuff, and I've seen on your socials plating up dozens, hundreds of plates of food. How does the presentation impact that? How do you work the presentation into that, and how do you communicate that then to? Because I assume then you have a bunch of staff that aren't your employees that are doing stuff to help you. Do you have to keep it super, super simple, or can you put some flourishes in and stuff? I'm just interested to know how that works.
It's a very different operation to Etch, but ultimately it's my food, my flavours. So the concept is 60 VIP guests at Brighton and Hove Football Club, and they get the chance to eat an a la carte meal before the game. So we get 2.5 hours to serve 60 people, which sounds quite leisurely, but these guests are all arriving at different times, but all need the same finish time. They need to be finished 15 to 20 minutes before the game starts. Okay. And that creates a problem, especially with a 2 o'clock kickoff. No guest is going to arrive at 11:15 and expect, their first course to be going out. So the food has to be tasty, simple, and ultimately like quick to plate up. And this is what I mean with plated up. Like if the flavours are all there, it's just making it look appetizing and tasty. It's more about we call it hits to the plate. So at the Tunnel Club, it would be like maximum 5 hits to a main course. So if you've got your protein as 1, a sauce as 2, a puree, a vegetable, because especially like some of the dishes that you've shown me there, they could maybe have like 15 hits to the dish. So it's a lot. It's very intricate. We wouldn't be able to do that.
No, and also you'd probably have a bunch of different chefs working on the same plate. Whereas I assume you're having one chef then do all 5 parts of the hit, or
So here at Etch, if it's like 12 hits to the plate, it'd be the one chef from start to finish. Occasionally, it just depends on the dish. If it's a hot dish, it could be like two chefs. If it's a cold dish, you've got a bit more time to plate it up. It's all about working out how long something will last for as well. It's all very well putting like a beautiful flower or petal on a dish, but we know realistically we need to, as soon as it's put on the dish, it needs to go out. So that's the last thing. The sorbet on ice cream is a last hit to the plate. And you've got all those things to kind of worry about and contemplate, but less hits in that sort of environment at Brighton and Hove is better, because it's all very well food being amazing, but if they're missing the whole point of their experience, which is to watch Brighton and Hove play, they're not going to be very understanding of that. So we've got a small window that we have to hit.
So just going back actually to Masterchef, just because that's really fascinating. It was 10 years ago, was it?
11 years, 2013.
Amazing. So, and you were like the youngest winner or something, weren't you?
One of the youngest at the time. Obviously, there's been 10 or 11 more winners, or 10 winners since. So
and I'm just interested. So in terms of the visual side of that show, how important do you think that was in the food that you were creating? Because again, that goes back 10 years where I don't think the visuals were important. Certainly not because things like social media weren't quite as, all that kind of stuff we talked about. Was it very important then? Did you get the feeling that they were talking about the visual side of it, or was it just more taste?
Yeah, I'd say it was still visual. I completely agree with you. Like visuals have almost taken food to another level. But even if we go back 40 years to when like Raymond Blanc and Michel Roux Jr. Are creating food in the UK and getting us the first Michelin stars. Like food has always been like visually appealing. It's just how far we're taking it now. We're pushing the boundaries. Again, in that competition with MasterChef, my main focus was getting a dish up to the judges that technically was good, but you also want it to look and eat well as well. So there's a lot of things going on. Like I said, I was 26 at the time, and I think as a younger chef, the visuals are more important sometimes than the actual result of the dish. And I was still learning a lot about myself as a chef. I think part of the show was I was almost trying to put too many flavours. And what was really nice with Michel Roux, he was almost like giving me hints as to like what I could do to push myself further. And it was just stripping back and maybe instead of like 4 or 5 ingredients, maybe looking at 2 or 3 and being less risque with them.
It's fascinating, isn't it? The more experience you get, the less you feel you need to do.
Yeah.
And that, again, something from this podcast I've learned is that, you know, the chefs that are more comfortable in their own skin with what they're doing and they know that it's good.
Yeah.
They're not putting 15 different colours on a plate. They're not doing 15 different flavours and all that kind of stuff because it's unnecessary. You know, from a visual point of view, it's just too confusing.
Yeah.
And from a taste point of view, you can't taste it all, right? So
I think what it is the older you get, you realise you're building up your reputation. You know, you've got something. When you're younger, you want it all, and you want to show that you can do every technique. And I always remember, I think it was the first round of Masterchef. It was the mystery box of ingredients, so maybe 15 ingredients. I just chose 2 or 3 ingredients and just did a simple dish that would get me through to the next round. One of the chefs that went out literally took all 15 ingredients and made all these sort of like dishes with it, or elements to a dish. He was making hollandaise with gnocchi and pasta. Yeah. Just trying to show everything that he could do. And that's what the judges didn't want. They wanted refinement, you know, to show that you could create a dish rather than a series of techniques.
Had they told you that in advance? Like,
they had,
or they let it down to you to kind of...
They leave it down to you to learn, but I think anyone going on the show now, you can kind of see the process of previous episodes, and you know, everything's available on Netflix or Amazon Prime, I think it is. So it's there to be learned, and that's where I think we are as chefs now. It's almost like we've got too much knowledge or too much at our fingertips. So when I was training to be a chef, there was a right way and a wrong way, and that's the majority of my training was that's right, that's wrong. There was never any explanation as to why that was right or why that was wrong. Yeah. But you soon learn that's the way the chef wants it. And now we've got chefs coming into kitchens. We're like, oh, well, you know, this is the way I used to do it, or this is the way I've seen on YouTube, or this is the way. And it's really difficult for them to understand that we want it a certain way. Yeah.
I mean, I agree. There's an awful lot of noise. So as a photographer, the amount of imagery out there now is just mind-blowing. Yeah. But so much of it is noise. Yeah. And that's why I was asking you about who inspires you, which chefs, because you need to know who's good. I mean, and good is subjective. Yeah. Right? Again, we might disagree about what constitutes good, but I think you need that inspiration. You need people to kind of follow, look up to, take little bits from, add your own spin, all that kind of stuff from the taste point of view, but also from the visual point of view. Because again, going back to Massimo, so many people now do that style of plating and have done more exciting things and done different things and moved that forwards. And that's how creativity moves, isn't it? You know, nobody's truly original. We're all standing on the shoulders of giants, and it's just finding out what you like, have an opinion, and sort of stick with it and see where it takes you.
I think it's also important to look at the area that you're working in as well. You know, the chefs that inspire me, I like to think they're further afield, you know, in terms of location.
So geographical,
okay. Yeah. You know, we want to be different down in Brighton. I'm really conscious that we're offering something like when we opened Etch, that we're really different to 64 Degrees and the Little Fish Market. There were 2 leading restaurants in Brighton and Hove when we opened. Even the Set restaurant up there as well. Actually, there's lots of restaurants I could mention, but we wanted to be different, have a different offering, and have a different food philosophy. And I think that's really important when creating a restaurant, but also being true to myself as a chef. Is like, what do I want my guests to eat?
Well, especially when it's your name on the door. Yeah, it needs to be. And I learned so when I started being a photographer professionally, you know, I started off doing weddings, pets, kids, all that kind of stuff, and I soon learned pretty damn quick. If this is me, why am I doing stuff I don't want to do?
What do you want to specialise in? And that's exactly how my career started in brasseries and not pubs, but simple foods. And then I really learned, I think it was Emile Le Manoir, Raymond Blanc, that completely changed my outlook. Really handed my notice in as soon as I got back to the kitchen. And
isn't that fascinating? It was like that light bulb moment of this is the stuff I want to be doing.
I think you believe in a philosophy, and working with the chefs I did at the beginning, I was fully focused on what they wanted, and you know, I loved everything about their restaurants. But then only going to a restaurant that was so far out of my league, you know, in terms of price, and it was a real special occasion and a real privilege to eat there. It really opened my eyes up to a different world of cooking. Yeah, and it made me realise actually that's where I want to go.
Yeah. We need aspiration. Yeah, don't we? Yeah. You know, things to reach for. Whether we get there or not is not necessarily the point. It's the journey. It's how much we develop, and you know, and for me to be able to make a career out of something that I like to do. Yeah. I mean, how lucky is that?
I agree.
really, really fortunate. And then probably the last point I want to go to, because you touched on it earlier, is when you get new guys coming in and not necessarily thinking they know it or what have you, but yeah, what do you want to see visually from chefs coming in? Do you like them coming with their own creative ideas? Do you like them to do it the way that you do a quenelle or whatever it might be? I was just interested to know what kind of things that you like to see in new chefs.
So in new chefs, I love to see everything that you mentioned. I love to see that creativity. What I don't want to see is them coming in with their philosophy and kind of enforcing it on the team here. I think there's a process to it, and that comes from when a new dish goes on the menu. And I think start small. I think coming up with a single recipe is something that we can add to a dish is a good start, because a lot of my repertoire is dishes and recipes that have already been put together, and we're tweaking and refining them further. So it'd be quite rare for a chef to come in and take a whole dish on the menu. But I kind of got to that age now where George, my head chef, is responsible for that process as well. I fully trust him. Obviously, I'm responsible for that final taste and that final sign-off. But I want to see him grow and develop as a chef. And I think there's a time to do things. If you're coming in as a commis or a chef de partie, and a lot of them coming in now saying, can I get a dish on the menu? Can I get this? The way I looked at it when I was in their shoes wasn't necessarily about getting a dish on the menu, because that dish is for me. That's it's my restaurant, it's my food. Absolutely. But what I was doing was then taking those recipes, learning and thinking, actually, if I have my own restaurant, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to serve it like that. I'm going to do this. So I was kind of writing that down and almost like practicing that in my own time when I had my time to shine. I'm kind of flipping your question back on itself. What is the fascination with a chef coming in and having a dish on the menu? Is that a pride thing? Or is it...
I guess it's kind of a badge of honour, isn't it? I would guess. I mean, not being in the industry myself from that point of view. Yeah, maybe there is that kind of badge that I've contributed possibly. I've created. I don't know.
I think the contribute is the word. Can I add an element into that dish? Or I mean, I love it when chefs do up dishes. It's just having that. I hate breaking their hearts as well. Say to us, actually, that's a really nice dish, but we can't fit it on the menu. What I love to do is taste the dish and actually be like, that process. I really love the way that you did the element of that dish and the way you kind of plated that up and take inspiration from that. But I never say to them, that's a rubbish dish, because that is a part of them and a part of their journey that they can then use in a pop-up or at a restaurant when they get there.
It's a fine line, isn't it? Confidence and arrogance and expectation that, I'm just going to have this sort of thing. You've got to earn it. And like you say, then go and do it yourself.
I think it's a fine line for me as well. I don't want to sound like I'm a dictator and no one's ever going to get a dish on the menu. But also I've got to be really conscious that we've got 8 chefs working with me. And there's always that saying, too many chefs spoil the broth. It's a fine line. And that process is really important to go through of rejection.
Absolutely. A failure. Let's be honest. We don't all grow through successes. You grow through failure, and you grow through keeping going and not giving up. What do you think is your favourite dish that you've created that you like to plate?
That's a really good question. I think the way that we change things at Etch, it makes it a really difficult question because, like I said, we've got the 6 menus on. I find the most challenging is to plate up a main course menu. But I do love
Is that one we're going to do today?
Unfortunately not. I mean, I could say one of the dishes we're doing today, because I do love the way the cured chalkstream trout is plated up. I love the way it all ties in together because the ingredients come from Hampshire. We've got a lovely little bit of smoked eel on there, which gives a lovely smoky flavour to the dish. It's quite an organic looking dish, but then the risk element is the horseradish ice cream.
Oh, really?
So we'll go with that one. But I do, to kind of twist your question, I do like main course, or the main dish we call it on the menu. And the meat dish is more of a challenge just in terms of temperature, getting it out right. And I think that's always the one that necessarily doesn't photograph as well, or
it's funny how that
it's
works
a bit more difficult. It's a bit more difficult to get out. So I'd say that's the most challenging. But I do like the way a chef that I didn't mention is like Alex Bond plates up, which is almost like having the sauce in the middle and then elements of the dish around the outside in an almost like organic way. It's a simple plating up style, but I think it looks really cool.
Yeah. And then I think the last question, I always ask people this, where do you think the most beautiful dish you've ever eaten was? I mean, that can be literally just on the seaside, because it doesn't have to be the plate, but the fish and chips on the coast or something like that, where you think, this is just beautiful. You know, is there a dish you can think of, not necessarily yours, you can have one of yours if you want. So just the most beautiful dish you've ever eaten?
I'm going to go back to Le Manoir, because it was only when I went there that I realised that food could be plated up to that next level.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds obvious, but when you're
not unless you experience it, right?
When you're like 17, 18 years old, like the world doesn't feel as big. It feels like you're doing really well, and my eyes were completely and utterly opened by.
So you were 17 when you went there?
I think I was 18.
Okay, yeah, I can see that being a huge shock.
Yeah, it was just everything, like the way when we arrived, the way we were greeted, the way that the chairs were pulled out, the beautiful restaurant. You could just see the attention to detail in every element was over and beyond. And you know, we went for the set lunch menu. I still remember I had mackerel followed by chicken.
Right.
And you're like, how can this blow your mind? But it literally blew my mind.
Yeah.
And it's just everything was like plated up perfectly. Everything was cooked perfectly. And I left there completely inspired to want to change my career.
Well, I think that's a brilliant answer. Stephen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's really fun. Thank you. That was great.